Hello, everybody. This is Tuesday, October 31st, episode 47 of Block Digest. And today we have a current block number, 492554. Ha, I didn't say it, in the normal number format. Ha, I bet that threw you guys off. So let's dive into something cool. Kind of a bit above my head. Poke prod, Mr. Achnix, if he wants to help spell this out. But Blockstream has just released a specification for a new blockchain scripting language. This is, I think, like most things this company does, is mind-blowing and revolutionary, and it's probably very confusing for most people out there. So I'm going to do my best to simplify it in a minute or two. So effectively, Bitcoin script is extremely limited in what it can do because there are the requirements for making sure that things can't just loop infinitely. And obviously with what we have now, it's mostly just dealing with the encumbrances and script checking for the public key encumbrances. And that's pretty much the gist of what most of it does. And you have like some other things, like we have the check lock time verify, check sequence verify for locking things for certain time periods, and things like a hash lock where you can require pieces of arbitrary data to actually fulfill an encumbrance, but it's very basic. And then you have something like Ethereum, which is completely Turing complete. You can do all kinds of complicated things in it. You can loop with the cost of gas taken into account, obviously. But the main differences between these two things are with Bitcoin script, you can know this will run and this will end. It'll either successfully execute, in which case coins will move, or it will fail, and that's it. But it ends. With something like Ethereum, there's no way to look at a contract and know that this is going to end at some point. Like you can't really project outward and analyze all the different outcomes that running a contract written for that platform actually finishes or does what you expect it to do. Well, simplicity is a shot at finding a nice middle ground there where you can actually have the building blocks for more complex like scripts or programs written on top. And pretty much they've started with re-implementing a lot of what's available in Bitcoin now, but in a way where you can actually like mathematically prove that this is going to end at a certain point and that there are a finite set of outcomes for running a particular script. And from here, we can actually prove this, solidify this foundation, and then start building up towards more complex scripts. Not completely full retard in my own words, like Ethereum, but to do more complicated things than just encumbering a coin where you provide something and then you can spend it. And like I said, this Blockstream is kind of the rock stars in the space to a big degree. But this really is something that is a foundational piece to start building much more complicated, much more featureful things that we can do with a blockchain. And right now, they're probably testing it on a side chain, but this is something that we could potentially, in future, after further vetting and testing of it, soft fork into Bitcoin itself. So poke prod, Achnix, if you want to actually, say something from
so if I understand it, it's just adding like a kind of like a hard structure, something that people can program off of and build off of that's very blockchain specific, or Bitcoin specific, I guess, where it kind of is going to help out Ethereum big time, maybe even more so than Bitcoin in the immediate like future, I guess, which is kind of weird too. So, but yeah, it seems really cool because it's going to reinforce potentially good behavior in coding practice. So I think that's interesting.
What do you mean? Can you afford it? The fees. This isn't like something that you pay extra fees for, or it's like some added feature. That this is like everything you do on Bitcoin, including the simplest transaction, is a smart contract written in Bitcoin scripting language. What this is effectively a new scripting language that right now re-implements all the things that Bitcoin can do, but in a way that's more secure and auditable, and gives us a way to start building off of with more assurances that the underlying pieces aren't going to kind of slip out from under us or do something they shouldn't, so that we can start doing more complicated things. So like this isn't like a new transaction format or something. This is a new language within which to create transactions, like just as they exist now, and of new types potentially in the future.
And you were saying it needs a soft fork to be used in Bitcoin?
Yeah, you would have to, and this is kind of actually feeds into like one of the big reasons that SegWit was done the way it is, because right now, in order to introduce a new script into Bitcoin, there's only so many opcodes that are kind of left undefined, so that we can define them with like a new script or a new way of checking or doing things. And with SegWit, now that we've kind of partitioned the actual signature scripts like outside of the main block, so to say, we can version those scripts in a more fluid way. So it's kind of an easier way to upgrade things without having to start picking at like the actual main layer, where we have all the kinds of complications that are why we're having trouble with trying to push through hard forks and all this contentious UI and fun stuff that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I really think it's an interesting thing. And, you know, when I was reading it, I was real excited because there's stuff in there about mass and some interesting thing about jets and the bit machine and all these different things, to where we could start building these systems with more of like a layer at the base that's you can't compromise the way that the system runs. And I don't know, I feel like there is definitely some confusion in this just because it's such a highly complicated thing, matter, field, everything. So yeah, it's still kind of I'm still like, digesting the whole thing, but for right now I feel like this is just about as important as anything going on right now. This is really groundbreaking. It's great stuff. It's going to be neat to see the innovations that come from this.
It's just complex. Like, I'm not sure really if I understand if it's a language by itself, or, like what it really incorporates yet. So, I think that's going to take a while to kind of really understand what's involved, and, how things would work with, or in a simplicity world, I guess, right?
Well, it is a language. It's a functional language without loops or recursion, like Bitcoin script is now, except set up in a way where you can kind of formally prove that your program is structured and will function properly. So like pretty much when you really break down like what a system like Bitcoin or Ethereum is, like each node it's a virtual machine. Like it's a virtual computer that has its own set of instructions, and when you pass data into it runs the instructions on the data that are part of something like a transaction, and it validates it, or it considers it invalid, ejects it. And like this is kind of how the process of validating a block and appending it to the blockchain works. So simplicity is pretty much a new language for those instructions that virtual machine that's part of a node is running.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it looks like trouble for Ethereum because, like without the recursive problem, like we might be able to create some systems that Ethereum's been trying to create for a while, like, the DAO. We know that incident happened, and I know that there was some problems in there with the code and the way that it was put together and constructed. So I mean, like maybe we can actually start building these systems that we talked about for a while and have them function.
Mm-hmm. But like I'm sure I'm gonna have people coming at me and talking about poor phrasings or poor terminology that I use to try and explain this, but that's effectively the gist of what this is. And I really think this is something that you should look into and just at least try to poke around and kind of get what's going on. And I'm sure, the more actually qualified people start digesting this and simplifying it into explanations for other people, like there'll be more information going around about, how this works. But I think instead of fumbling around because Mr. Achnix decides to be a little smart ass, we're gonna dive into
What do you mean? What are you accusing me of?
I'm accusing you of being a smarty pants when I ask you to help me explain things, Mr. Smarty Pants.
It's pleading the fifth.
Oh, I didn't think it was that bad of an explanation. It's a good framework, It's gonna, kind of maybe direct people in a kind of just in a better understanding, of the whole entire way that it works. So I think that it's impressive in itself. And it seems to be bridging the EVM gap with the Bitcoin gap here too. So there's a lot of overlap between these two different technologies. So I also find that really interesting.
Yeah, I hope that one day we can finally get to those users that don't want to see anything under the hood with this sort of programming, and they don't really know anything about how it works other than the system they're using works, and it's using simplicity in Bitcoin.
I do believe before we formally jump into this new story on my screen, Janine has something she wants to say.
Yeah, so in case anyone who's listening wasn't aware, it is Bitcoin's birthday today. Bitcoin just turned 9 years. Yes, I did say Bitcoin. It just turned 9 years old today. So I thought we wanted to mention that and say happy birthday because pretty eventful. Because I actually just looked up what the prices were of Bitcoin in past years on its birthday, and in October 31st, 2015, it was about $325. Last year, on October 31st, it was about $700 USD. And today, it is way above $6,400. So that it really puts into perspective how far we've come in that regard.
To the moon! And to help us get there, what's this? Chicago Mercantile Exchange is going to be launching Bitcoin futures using crypto facilities from London as a price index. What? More institutional products? Come on, guys. Come on. Moon fuel. Let's keep this shit going.
Yeah,
but,
man. It looks like the CME group here is going to try and help spot the price for us. I mean, from the legitimate side there, they made an announcement talking about how they're going to start trading these future contracts at the end of this year or the fourth quarter of this year. And this is all pending some regulatory, they got to get through these regulations that they're trying to before they start trading these. But the CEO did a video with CNBC where he said he was real confident in it. And, he says that their self-certification will go through and they are working with the regulators. And, this is a result from client interest. And, they're working with crypto facilities to come up with this price. And, they're using several different exchanges to get the data. It's Bitstamp, GDAX, ItBit, and Kraken. And they said that this spot market has grown roughly to 1.5 billion in notional value each day, which I'm not quite sure, how much those numbers are all accurate and everything, but it definitely is pouring in a lot of this money from where people have been, the Wall Street, these customers want to get in. And so it looks like they're going to start getting in through these futures markets.
Because I mean, that's like I think I touched on this last time Blake was on the show. Like, in order to really be able to sink insane amounts of money into this market, you need large amounts regularly being traded. Otherwise, like, you're just going to be the asshole pushing it up 10 times while everybody sells up there and pushes it right back down. And then, hey, that wasn't a good trade for you. So why would you make it? But see, one thing I want to kind of segue into relating to the CME futures is the crypto facilities that they're actually going to be using for their index released their 2x hard fork policy today. And while there's no definitive language in here making a blanket stance that Bitcoin, as I'm sure most of our viewers and I see it, is going to be what they consider Bitcoin, but they're moving towards a more reasonable criteria to assess what they're going to list as Bitcoin compared to some companies, Coinbase, using ridiculous metrics like hash rate on an undefined time period. They're pretty much going to be looking at the overall value of things. So, like, obviously, if 2x were to drop down to $10 or something right out the gates, that they would effectively dismiss it by what I'm looking at. But they've also kind of quantified a relative value as far as whether or not they'll actually deliver this or recognize 2x beyond just, oh, that happened. And effectively what they're doing is the bar they're setting is taking the cumulative value of Bitcoin and the 2x fork and requiring at least 30% value of the net total there on the 2x side to actually consider this something deliverable for the futures products they work. Or I'm assuming that's also the lower floor of even considering defining 2x as Bitcoin proper. And the one thing that they did point out is that this metric they've established pretty much retroactively would have excluded Bitcoin Cash from being considered as a viable product or as Bitcoin itself. So that is something that they're taking into account. They're actually looking to see how they can apply this criteria consistently and not just kind of scrambling one way or the other to react to this single incident. So, well, again, somebody like me or somebody like other maximalists such as myself might be a little irritated that they're not blanketly calling Bitcoin Bitcoin. I do think this is a nice trend to see when looking at a lot of these bigger players or institutional level players. They're actually through the consequences or trying to of how their actions as far as listing one thing as the other would affect the ecosystem as a whole. They're not simply gung-ho behind one factional proposal or the other.
Yeah, that's where I was, it's coming from the same sort of position. I did like the fact that it felt like a pretty rigorous test to actually try and even challenge it. So like you're saying, the language doesn't say like, we're definitely going to call Bitcoin what we know it as today as, this, but it certainly does make it challenging for any up and comer to try and even attempt to take that. It's what it looks like to me. So, and like you're saying, these crypto facilities guys with the CME group, the CME group hasn't made a statement on this yet, but they work together right now. I imagine they would probably have the same sentiment about the situation.
What I find interesting is that I just went over and looked at their Twitter feed, the CME group Twitter feed, and because I wanted to just see what was their sentiment about Bitcoin prior to this. And actually, it's pretty, before 2016, it's pretty scant. I mean, they had tweets about their Bitcoin reference rate products and things like that in 2016, but in 2015, they really didn't talk about it at all. 2014, one of the 3 tweets that they made about it in 2014 or 2013 was they retweeted someone asking, why would Bitcoin be the currency of choice? Why not choose precious metals? So I wonder where their perspective shifted since then, because that seems like an interesting thing to tweet considering what happened now.
I mean, it just goes to show the the stages of denial. I mean, like, it's really something we've been seeing for the past 8 years or so progress on a global scale. And I mean, like, I remember, like, what, just a couple years ago, like, how often did you see conversations about, oh, well, maybe we won't become like a giant global reserve asset or currency. Maybe Bitcoin isn't gonna just take over the world. Like, maybe we'll just fall into a niche somewhere. Like, maybe we will just, like, people like thought, hey, we might just fall into like a niche like PayPal, and not because of reckless nonsense like gigablocks or centralization pressures, but just, hey, that maybe plateau of user support or people seeing value in this, and that kind of uh, potential outcome is just kind of drifted off to the wayside. Like, I really don't even see those kinds of conversations internal to the ecosystem anymore, whereas that used to be a big topic of discussion. Like, will we actually break out past the niche? And I think, looking around us right now, we've clearly shot past the potential to be trapped in a number of niches that were set up for us in the past.
Yeah, in that same CNBC interview with the CEO of CME Group, he was asked about Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett and their predictions on Bitcoin and all the comments that they've made. And, it looked like he is on the other end of this, like, evolution learning about Bitcoin, where he's saying, you can't ignore the pent up demand for it. And he thinks that, according to him, he was saying that he thinks they're just misunderstanding. They think that maybe the trading and the way that it's bought and sold is kind of, since it's all off books and everything, so to speak, or, not regulated yet, that they are still in this fog of like, well, it just can't be used, where these CME guys, they seem to be on the ball about like, yeah, you can't be ignored anymore. And yeah, it's definitely nice to kind of get past that part where we're like, are we going to break through this? Are we really going to get these mainstream people in? And it's just, yeah, it does feel nice to be past that part of it.
All right, we ready for the funny part, guys? Are we ready?
Yeah.
All right, guys. It's Lawless Time. Bitcoin Cash is hard forking to fix their difficulty adjustment because, oh my God, it's almost like huge systemic problems pop up when you just impulsively hard fork in the first thing you think of to do something. I mean, like, am I right, guys?
Well, okay, from what I've heard, they're doing a slightly better job than not Ethereum, but Parity, which is still making changes to its code with a day or two or 1 or 2 days now to go until they have a fork. So they're doing a bit better than some other people, but
yeah, I think the basic gist of what they're doing is taking a pretty much a day's sample of or what should be a day's sample of blocks, 144 blocks, and effectively averaging the timestamps and the difficulty at the top three and then the tailing three of that, and then pretty much having an extreme of 2 days or half a day on either side to have a more dynamic rolling adjustment. But I mean, is this going to go so smooth, guys? I mean, are we just going to have a snap hard forks done, or is there some potential for Bitcoin Cash Classic here?
Man, I was going to laugh. I was laughing at this because in the statement, there's a couple of parts. One of them says, we have been in communication with Bitcoin Cash miners and they're expecting this upgrade. And it's just like, yeah, I imagine, because there's only a couple of them, and you guys know it. And our decision to choose one specific protocol was not easy because Bitcoin Cash has several independent development teams, which, I don't know about that. And I mean, I just, yeah, it's not going to be hard for them to get a fork because it's not hard to reach consensus on that chain. It's pretty much one guy, two guys.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not so sure that they can legitimately claim they have multiple developer teams. I mean, you've had XT and then Classic and then BU. Well, when BU was around, XT and Classic changed their code to pretty much emulate BU. And now that Bitcoin Cash forked off, like, oh, like it's like one group tries something stupid and it didn't work, and so the next group tries, and then the first one changes their thing to be in a line with the next group, and it's like a domino like this. And I mean, ultimately, like, we could just see this as a smooth fork, splinter off, but I mean, we've seen a lot of trolling in this space. Like, how many Coinbase rewards on the Bitcoin Cash chain have said things like "fuck Bitcoin Cash" or just like trolled the hell out of them? I mean, how do we know that some miners might just keep mining the original client just as a joke or a "fuck you"?
It's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Ah, man, it's just silliness.
It is.
But you guys want to slide into the latest 2x agreement? Or not agreement, statement.
Well, before we go there, the chat apparently is like screaming at us to mention that we've apparently reached a new all-time high, because that doesn't happen every other day now. Something like that hasn't been. We really need a new sign. How many days since a new all-time high? Like,
well, I'm sorry, chat, but I'm not Chris, so I'm not gonna say that because reasons.
Not price crazy, but cheers on 6,500, I guess.
I could be trading this if I wasn't trying to inform you guys about this.
Well, why do you need to trade it? Just sit on it.
Because I could get more of it to sit on. But we've seen another no 2x statement issued by the BHB Network in Italy. And effectively, it's pretty much saying, the Italian Bitcoin community's had a lot of firsts. They've had one of the oldest operating Bitcoin exchanges, wallets. They're actually a pretty nice space as far as a startup incubator goes in terms of the BHB themselves. And there's a pretty big Bitcoin presence in Italy. And a lot of them are not very happy with, contentious struggles or attempts to undermine Bitcoin by just snatching logos or ticker symbols, or trying to fool light clients with just vague language and double speak. And, they're not very happy with this. And actually seen a couple different companies, Associate, an actual Bitcoin meetup, which I would like to point out. It's kind of hard to Sybil attack, social consensus in something like an in-person meetup where everybody's actually there looking at each other as they say things or give their opinion. And Eternity Wall, Oracleize, Tinklet, Pan Labs, the founder of Green Address is also the nice person who's brought us AB Core, which allows you to run a full node on your phone if you care to do that. And it's, it seems like we've had a rolling stampede of these letters lately. I mean, has anybody actually seen company heads in the space try to kind of dismiss this as toxic trolling or anything?
No, I've actually mostly seen them ignore it. And by the way, if anyone wants to see a full list of all of the community meetup groups around the world that have made statements about SegWit2x, you can go to Bitcoin Magazine, because they recently made a blog post about it's like includes a list of all those communities and a summary of what they said. But yeah, otherwise, I think
that's actually that's actually in the video description for anybody who wants to take a shortcut to that. But a good thing to mention that, Janine. I'm still trying to get the hang of this whole hosting thing.
All right.
All right. So do we want to talk about the potential fake news thing first, or do we want to talk about the funny, stupid thing first?
Your choice, either or.
All righty then. Let's look at people being very stupid. Hey guys, would anybody here have expected that if you had a cryptocurrency convention in Cancun, Mexico, that's pretty much screaming that everybody there is involved in something that, is generally very wealthy people because of the huge immense wealth it's creating, be shocked that local police and local citizens start accosting people going to this convention? shaking them down for money. Is that a surprise to anybody?
I guess it was the Voorhees,
Nope.
man, because I saw his tweet where it was saying, you know, DevCon 3 in Cancun, Mexico. And yeah, Cancun is definitely an international city, but it's not one of the, it's still not really a safe place to be walking around flaunting wealth, or not even flaunting, just to be known that you're working in a place where wealth could be found, because the cartel does not play, and they don't play in Cancun. That's a lot of money to be made there. And yeah, they're getting held up by Mexican police, and it's not a pretty thing, but I mean, like, it's still going on. If you're a dev heading down there, you know, good OPSEC, please.
Yeah, what's the word for that? Situational awareness.
Right? Definitely need to be aware that there is a cartel that is in charge of the way things are run in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not into cryptocurrency, like, it's generally not a good idea to announce announce your flights. It's not a good idea to announce like very specific areas you'll be staying. That's just generally not a good idea, because that small amount of information can be very valuable. In terms of your flight, you can actually get your flight stolen, because if someone knows your first and last name, it makes it a lot easier for them to then brute force the booking number, and then they can steal a bunch. If not your data, they can actually steal your flight. There was a whole talk on this at CCC in, I believe it was 2015, I think. But yeah, I cannot imagine announcing that especially, yeah, going to a country like that that's known for having not so friendly police. I would not want to announce that I was coming, especially if I was a public figure who is known to have a lot of money. Yeah.
Right. We're supposed to practice good OPSEC here in this space. And I've never really been that great at it, but I still try to. And like, yeah, every little bit like that where somebody can manage to gobble up a little bit of information about what you're trying to do, they can try and step in there for you and take your spot. And, you know, that's why it's important to do that operational security like you're talking about.
Alrighty. So who wants to get into the FUD now? It's that Bitcoin is for terrorists. Bitcoin is for criminals, for rogue nation states that the United States wants to close out of things that they don't approve of. Because apparently, didn't have the chance to actually dig beyond this source because a lot of it wasn't in English, and it's a lot of publications that I'm not personally aware of, so can't really speak to their credibility. But IFP News is saying that Iran's Deputy Minister of Information and Communication Technology, Amir Hossein Davi, is looking into widespread infrastructure integration, both economically and technologically, to start allowing the use of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies domestically in Iran. So who's got the FUD headline? Come on, they were rolling off the tongue for Kim Jong-un. Who's got some now?
Well, I think because when the claim that Iran was saying it could be used for terrorism, when that first came up, like, a bunch of people were pointing to the UK government, which was saying that, because they did a study 2 years ago, actually, that said, no, it's actually very low on the scale of things that could be used for terrorism funding.
Right.
Yeah,
I think. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, I think you're right. It's just like you mentioned the name of the country, like where people have an association of like, well, maybe that's where it's coming out of, and then they can mention it there. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I actually cut myself off by accident. I clicked the microphone button in the middle of talking.
But yeah, like I was just like, I think, you know, the place where I saw this was from Bitcoin.com. And like, yeah, it does seem like just, you know, vague sources. It's nothing really stamped down in stone or anything. And it does feel like kind of like just trying to draw an association of the names Iran and Bitcoin.
Well, see, I still like stories like this, you know, even though it's not really definitively verifiable. But 'cause it's a lot of abstract things to think about. I mean, like a lot of people have argued for a long time that Bitcoin is pretty much useless unless you're buying drugs with it or just like other illegal nonsense like that. But I really think a case like Iran and like even like North Korea when we were talking about that a few weeks ago, it really kind of shows it's not the case because Iran is a country, and think what you want about the nature of their government and freedom in the country, but they are objectively being surrounded by a moat of financial sanctions and effectively having large chunks of the entire rest of the world telling them what they should be able to do or should not be able to do, or what kinds of trade or activities they can engage in politically. And the economic infrastructure of the world it always is that pressure point that's applied before things really get to violence or military conflict. And things like this, this shows, if this is a legitimate story, actual thoughts like that are really well thought through on how to kind of counteract things like that without resorting to military action themselves. I mean, if they really are investigating how to integrate in a widespread way Bitcoin for commercial activity within their country, well, that presents a nice base for something that is a bridge to other countries for international commerce and trade that kind of removes a lot of the friction of using something like that. Because if you don't have support for it domestically in your country, well, now you have to add the friction of exchange services and the liquidity implications of like moving in and out of something like that to actually use it to engage in international trade. Whereas if you actually take the steps to kind of integrate things domestically, so money moving in and out of the country is useful in the country itself too, so there's less overall friction. Like something that you earn in country, you don't have to go through the steps of converting it to something else, taking the risks or extra frictions of that can just be seamlessly used to engage in commerce internationally. And as well, money made internationally, well, that's now seamlessly usable on a domestic scale too. So it really shows, I think, some forethought in a government to really start considering these things and be willing to actually investigate and consider options like this as opposed to just war. Because I mean that's usually what happens in situations like this historically, when people start applying financial pressure that eventually leads to either the application of military pressure from the external world or a reaction of military pressure from those having, the screws turned financially. And it's, everybody's always so quick to jump at like headlines in the space and what does that mean for the price, or what does that mean for this short-term thing. And it's not really a lot of just thinking about like where is the general dynamic and flow of all these events leading to cumulatively.
Yeah, because it makes sense, honestly, as as you're saying, like they don't really have some of the hindrances like we have, as far as, we've got to step through all these hurdles where they could sort of set up this domestic infrastructure for this system to run within their borders and then later on expand outward as the rest of the country adopts. It would be really smart. And, I think it could be happening. It's just, like you're saying, I think that, a lot of these people who want to try and steer a narrative or want to try and make the price move, they just sort of gobble it together without, I mean, like it could be the news cycle where it's just like you got to get it out first, or it's just like a rush to get things out without sources. But it does feel like to me like it was kind of just thrown out there, like Iran, Bitcoin, bad, where like you're saying, it could very well be used for a lot of positive things in their country. And, hopefully there will be some truth out of this where later we do start seeing some statements actually out of Iran.
Anything else?
I have nothing more on this topic, but I did want to mention some other fake news relating to the Catalonia stuff that we talked about on Friday.
Shoot.
There was, I can actually, if you want to bring it up, I can probably send you the link. There was an article going around on, you guessed it, Cointelegraph. Actually, I don't, where did it go? Oh, I didn't archive the Cointelegraph, but I archived the other one. Anyway, there was an article going around on Cointelegraph about the fact they were asserting that Vitalik had advised the Catalan government to do the e-residency thing. Now, I thought that was bullshit the moment I saw it. I was like, there's no way he did that. That doesn't sound, because, you know, and Vitalik then later tweeted that that statement was completely false. The problem is that the article that we shared on the show on Friday from the IB Times, it actually linked to this article that the Cointelegraph article also linked to. The reason I didn't catch it is because the IB Times actually didn't say Vitalik advised the Catalan government. They just said that Vitalik was mentioned in as being a credit to their inspiration or whatever. So I didn't look into that any further, but this article is the one that the Cointelegraph one, oh yeah, proof of Vitalik. This is the article that the Cointelegraph and the IB Times both linked to, and I thought it was very, very interesting because in all three articles, there's this guy named Dan, let me check his name, Daniel Marco. He's from the Smart Catalonia project or whatever. I guess he's trying to make Catalonia into some kind of smart region or whatever with telecommunications and things like that. And he's mentioned by name in all three articles, so I have a very strong suspicion that he was probably the source of the lie, the fake news, because he was the only person from the Catalan government that showed up at the so-called conference that Vitalik attended at the beginning of October. And Times kind of hinted that Vitalik might have been at this conference, though they didn't name it, so I can't verify that. But if they were claiming that he was at this conference, I think it was bullshit because it was actually an ICO, like everything about it was an ICO event, and there was no mention of Vitalik speaking on their website or anything. It was called BCon, BECON. There was no mention of him showing up, so I don't know what they're talking about. But yeah, I think because this guy is the only person really quoted in these articles, he's probably the source of the leak. So yeah, if anyone here thought Vitalik advised the Catalan government on the e-residency thing, not true. So that's my bit of fake news for today.
In his words, and Dwight's words from The Office, false.
Yeah. I looked a little bit into where the source of the claim was that Catalonia was looking into e-residency stuff, and as far as I can tell, that seems pretty legit. But the claim that Vitalik was involved with it, I mean, he might have inspired it if they were listening to him from afar, but there is no evidence of him going directly to them and saying, hey, you should do an e-residency thing with ICOs. Actually, a fake Twitter account. I found a Twitter account called Catcoin or Catalan Coin, and it's existed for 2 years, I think. And there's a Twitter account for it, and it's trying to pump this coin that doesn't actually exist. I've never heard of it before this point, but yeah.
The time horizons of scammers in this space will never cease to amaze me.
Yep.
I know. We got a bunch of people that still need to learn that situation. That this, you just throw a name on it or proof of Vitalik, and then you got all this money coming your way, and it's just fake.
Mm-hmm. But I guess if nobody has anything to add, we'll everybody feel comfortable wrapping things up for the day so we can all go dress up in funny costumes and get wasted.
Well, that reminds me, are we going to tell our scary Bitcoin stories before we close?
Oh,
Right?
yes. I completely forgot about that. Why don't you take us off with the lead, Janine?
Yeah, I can start. So probably, well, the scary story we could mention, probably everyone's seen it by now, but it was in Wired, and it was about a guy who bought Bitcoin at $3,000 when it was $3,000, or no, he bought $3,000 worth of Bitcoin, which is about 7.4 Bitcoins. And he was storing it on his Trezor. He basically wrote down his PIN and the seed on the same piece of paper. And when I think he went to go on vacation or something, and he, was worried about what happens if, I die while I'm gone and I lose this paper. He left the paper under his daughter's pillow. The housekeeper came by while he was gone and threw away the piece of paper. So yeah, he was kind of screwed at that point. But actually, on the show, before, there was a minor vulnerability in the Trezor, which would actually allow you to bypass. I wouldn't be able to describe it technically, but we did. I wouldn't be able to describe it now, but we did mention it before, where you could actually bypass the PIN and get the Trezor device to actually spit out the seed. And that was before the update came a few months ago. And so he was actually able to get a kid, I think he's 15, and he lives here in the UK, and he was helping him get it. And so by the time that he got the Bitcoins back, they were worth $30,000. So that was a scary story averted, I guess.
So he did get them back.
Yeah, he did get them back.
Damn. All right. Well, my scary story, this dude didn't get his Bitcoin back. Scariest place in Bitcoin is shorting Bitcoin. And it looks like just the other day, somebody shorted 50 million and lost all 50 million in Bitcoin. So, ouch, folks. That's the scary place to be.
All right, guys, not to toot my own horn, I think I have the scariest story. This comes from Mr. Trace Mayer, if anybody knows him. See, one of Trace Mayer's good friends put something like $11 million in Bitcoin. But you know what he did to store that? He used blockchain info. And,
my God.
oh yeah, everybody sees where this is going. They fucked up generating his keys.
Oh my God, I'm so surprised. That never happens.
$11 million went poof. And then he went to Trace Mayer asking what he could do to get his Bitcoin back. And you know what Trace had to tell him? Nothing. And so this man learned probably one of the most expensive lessons that's ever been learned dealing with this incompetent, shittily engineered web wallet. Don't keep your money on a web wallet. Secure your own private keys. And then, of course, he just invested more in Bitcoin anyway, and he's been doing really well since. But $11 million is a pretty expensive lesson to learn not to use a website to manage your digital money.
Yeah, I mean, I think a bunch of people have lost Bitcoin through blockchain.info. I've lost a little bit, and their customer service, like, not even worth really going after them anymore, to be honest. But yeah, their customer service is really bad.
Yeah, I'd definitely say using that wallet would be scary, especially that amount. Oof, no way. Sorry.
But I guess it's time to wrap her up. I would like to say, though, before that I'm sure some of you, James Bond in particular, have noticed that Chris Ellis has been missing the past few days. He's still recuperating from a treatment for his headaches in the hospital, so I hope everybody's with me and hoping that he actually feels better tomorrow and gets back on his feet, because I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing.
I think you're doing fine. Because he's already feeling like he looks. Yesterday, if you ever know what Botox does to someone's face, it makes them look a little weird for a few hours. But he's doing fine today. I mean, he's talking normally. His headaches were a little worse because apparently Botox can do that to you. But otherwise, he's fine. He just doesn't want to talk too much because he's supposed to be resting over the next 2 weeks or so. That's not to say that he's going to be on a 2-week hiatus, but he is supposed to rest his voice for a while and see what happens with the treatment.
Well, I hope see you there in the chat, Chris. I hope you're feeling better. Like I've said multiple times, it's a group effort in anarchy. Don't ever hesitate if you need to take a break. But I guess we'll go with my rounding message. You have no choice, since I am the host today. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and you'll have a happy Halloween.